Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 94. I can't believe we are almost near 100 episodes. Amazing. If you listened to episode 92 with Talila Kroy, you are going to love today's episode, which is a follow-on from episode 92. This is all about fundamentally building a sales function. How do you build a scalable sales function? And how do you get all the pieces right? So first episode, we really unpacked some of the foundations that you want to have in place before you start recruiting salespeople. So go back and have a listen to episode 92. We talked about lots of really super practical stuff that you need to do to make sure that if you're going to hire someone, they're set up for success once you've hired them. Today's episode is all about the recruitment process. Okay, let's assume you've got those things, those sort of foundations, some of those things you're going to want to use in your recruitment process. But what are the secrets in the recruitment process? How should you follow it step by step? What's the way to do it? How do you think about your interviews? What questions should you be asking? What should you be focused on? When should you do some kind of an assessment? What does that look like? All of these things. So this is a super practical episode, as the episode 92 was. So I really hope you enjoyed today's episode with Talila Kroy, the co-founder, I should say, of Emple, all about how to really optimize sales recruitment. Enjoy. Welcome to the ScaleHQ podcast, your weekly injection of tips and insights into the secrets of scaling. I'm your host, Sean Steele, and I am obsessed with figuring out how to help founders just like you who are creating real value in the world to scale up so they can fulfill their potential. I do that each week by interviewing founders who successfully scaled, experts in all the areas of business that you need to master, interviews with founders who are still on the way up, and 10-minute tutorials and reflections from me based on my experiences in creating $100 million in revenue for 4 other companies over 8 years. So let's dive in and see what gems we can find together on this week's episode of the ScaleHQ podcast. Well, welcome back to our regular listeners, and to anybody joining us for the first time, thrilled as always to have you. And we are welcoming back this week Talila Kroy, co-founder and director of Emple, a business that helps Australian companies build scalable sales engines. Who doesn't want one of those? I'll have 5, please, Talila.
Thank you for coming right
Pop
up.
that in the order cart,
No,
and just if you could deliver it by 5 o'clock tomorrow, that'd be awesome.
Takes a little longer than that, but yes, we certainly can deliver them all 5.
Damn it.
So,
well, look, last time, Talila, it's lovely to have you back. Thank you so much. Number 1, and number 2, we got so much value out of your interview last time, so I'm really grateful to that. And what we were talking about was the fact that anybody who wants to build an 8-figure company, 10 million plus in revenue, and to keep scaling, needs a systematic way of acquiring profitable customers. They do. And there's lots of ways to do that, and people have different kinds of businesses, but you guys are quite focused on helping founders nail the conversion and the people and the reporting to the sales ecosystem to make sure they optimize the outcomes from any leads they've got. And last time we talked a lot about the foundations that you need to get right, like compensation design and the performance agreement and KPIs and reverse engineering sort of what success looks like and the onboarding period and all this awesome foundational stuff. And so today I kind of want to assume, okay, great, our listeners have done that. And if you're listening today and you didn't hear the last episode, please go back and listen to it, because you need those things in place before you invest in the hiring of salespeople. So do not listen to today and then run out there and hire salespeople without going and doing the other stuff first, because Talila and I will both tell you, you are not setting them up for success. You will build a lot of frustration. You will waste a lot of time and waste a lot of money. So today I want to talk to you about what founders need to do to nail the hiring process, assessing their capability, not just hiring somebody they like. And, let's face it, salespeople typically excellent first interviewers.
They're very likable. Yes.
They're very likable. They're so good at it. And you've got to go deeper than that first interview and your gut feel. Yes. So I would love for you today to just unpack, the methodology. How do you find? How do you interview? How do you assess? How do you think about hiring these people? Give me as many juicy secrets and tips you can so that founders can implement those straight away.
Will do. And just so that everyone really pays attention, let's focus on what's at stake here. You get it right, a good producer will earn you $1 million plus. That's kind of the going rate in a lot of B2B areas. Get it wrong, that person will waste a lot of time, a lot of money, burn your leads. You'll have to replace them. It'll be very expensive. Everyone will be upset. It will affect morale. It'll affect your client relationships. And the statistics are that the odds are not in your favor. About 50% of people fail. So getting this right will change those statistics dramatically. And the chances of a failure will be next to none.
They reduce.
Yes.
And, giving it so high risk, high reward, wouldn't you want to do, like, this is always what's baffling. It's like, wouldn't you want to stack the deck on this one, especially if you don't know how to do this?
That's it.
It's not like other parts of your business that you can just, as a founder, kind of cowboy your way through and just hope for the best. Like, there's a lot of areas where you can just kind of make it up and chat GPT and whatever, and you'll be fine. But sales, I don't think that's quite the same with sales. So where do we start?
Yes. So we start again. We've done all the work, as you said, in the background. And one of those things that we said we'd do that I want to touch on again is we got clarity on the role. Because if we don't have clarity on the role, it's very difficult to understand what is a good fit when they come along, because all the resumes will look very different. They'll be formatted differently. They'll have lots of good stuff on each of them, and it can be quite confusing, particularly when you see high sales performance in lots of different areas. So I think the best way of looking at this is, imagine you're building a sports team. For example, if you were building a soccer team, you wouldn't necessarily want to hire a tennis player. They might be a great tennis player, but they're not necessarily a good soccer player or as good a soccer player. And therefore, whilst all salespeople can be considered like sportsmen or sportswomen, we want to try to narrow down and hone in on the skills that are in our specific team environment. So how does that look differently? You know, some environments require a lot of hunting. Others require very rapid closing. Some require a long sales cycle and a lot of nurturing, for example. Some require detailed capability to create proposals and write things and document stuff, whereas others are much more face-to-face and relationship-based. So just really detailing, what does your salesperson need to be able to do? Who are they talking to? How do they need to be able to present themselves and show up? Even down to the demographics, you know, who's going to fit best into with that particular client persona. So documenting that, you know, we ask a lot of structured questions when we do an onboarding, when we do a positioning session before a hire, and that gets down to the nitty-gritty of who this person is and what they need to be. Now, you will have done that work in your PMA, so hopefully, if you've done a performance measurement agreement, you've got some of that stuff. It's also important to know that people are motivated in different ways. You'll get the person that's motivated by the job, like they're very committed to their job and their role, and they see it as a big part or extension of themselves. And then you get people who are more making money, basically, is the thing that they want. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's important to understand their motivation, because a lot of times it will affect how good they are in different sales cycles. And the longer the sales cycle...
Can you give me just an example of that? Like, you know, where might be a good fit and where might be a bad fit for a example sales cycle?
Great question. So what we found, and I'll go back a little bit to our history of how we used to do the recruitment in the early days, was that intrinsically motivated people, which is people that are actually motivated by the purpose behind the role, they're quite happy to have a long sales cycle. They don't mind. They see the long vision. They want the results for the company. Those people who are really quite focused on making a good lot of money, they can be a great salesperson for you, but they're good in short closing type roles or roles that are fast to move, where I'm not going to say they're transactional, because you never want to be transactional, but they don't involve as much investment of time and energy and commitment. So that's a small example.
I'm only laughing because my first sales roles, the thing that I loved about sales the most was how instant the feedback was. Like, change of state, walk in that day, you've thought about your script, you've adjusted these 3 things.
That's true.
Do a phone call, boom, you got a sale. And I had my manager trained to send me an email and go, Sean, you just make this much in commission. And I could see I loved that motivation. I loved the short feedback loop cycle. And I always thought really long sales cycle stuff would probably drive me up the wall. To your point. It was just not aligned with the way that I thought and the way I like to operate.
And that also touches on another point, which is that salespeople need to build their confidence. And it's not just money is not just money. Money is a badge of honor and a badge of success too. So that's a thing we need to understand for sales communicators. Making good money is I am worthwhile. I'm doing my job. So it's not just about wanting to get their hands on the dollars, if you know what I mean. And that's true for the
Mm.
extrinsically motivated ones too. The ones, like you said, that just want that feedback.
Can I just give an example on the first point? Because you talked about kind of the environments and customer types and the sort of yield of the sale and the sales cycle that they probably need to be familiar with if they're likely to succeed. And I always remember finding that in education. It was very rare that you would find education salespeople, but the typical price point was somewhere between $4,000 and $10,000. It was going to be done with some kind of a payment plan. It was never going to be more than a 2-call close. So it was always going to be a very short, from the time that you actually did a sort of needs analysis to enrolling the student was never going to be more than a couple of weeks. It wasn't going to be 3 months or 6 months or 9 months or 12 months or 18 months. And we found great success with people from a fitness background because they were comfortable talking to people about emotions and education is a confidence-based
very good point.
advisory process because they're scared that they're going to fail in the course. And so that's actually the majority of the call is about, are they going to succeed in this thing? What support have they got? How long does it take? Blah, blah, blah. It's not about what's in the course. And the fitness salespeople were used to relatively short cycles. The yield was probably a little bit different, but maybe it's similar in terms of a lifetime value. But they understood the kind of conversation, how many conversations, and how to have it. And those people succeeded in an education environment, but many other people would not have. And so it's a good example of how to get those kind of key features of the sales process to match.
Yeah. And one of the things, and I think you've touched on it, is that if a person themselves has limiting beliefs of their own, they can't sell a certain thing to someone. So if they believe that, I don't know, it's a waste of money to spend $50,000 on a self-development course, then they're not going to be able to sell it to anyone else. It's just not going to work. So we used to use a sales tool, which is still pretty good. It's called the Objective Management Group Assessment. We don't use it anymore, and I'll explain why, but it is quite harsh on people. We used to make applicants do it, and it was an hour of their time. It would pepper them with questions. And at the end, it would give us a deep report. Are they intrinsically motivated, extrinsically motivated? What are their limiting beliefs? Are they comfortable talking about money? Are they like a person that can hold their own with confidence and become like a trusted advisor? Or are they more of a relationship-based seller? How do they sell? And all sorts of things like that. It's really valuable, insightful. And yeah, one of the things it would show would be those limiting beliefs. And it would literally list them. So-and-so's not comfortable about money, talk about money. So-and-so isn't comfortable challenging the client. So-and-so, it really was interesting.
That makes complete sense. Yeah, I mean, and equally the opposite is true, right? If they can develop a belief that what you have is the most important thing to solve X, Y, Z problem, that it's almost would baffle them as to why somebody would not take that solution to solve that problem because it is the best fit. That level of rock solid belief, absolutely. Like I had to develop that level of belief in white pages listings to be successful, which was not easy. But I promise you, I was absolutely convinced that these companies would be crazy if they were large companies and people were looking for them all the time. This is obviously pre-internet, that they would not need bold, super bold. They need to be in every directory. They need logos. They need color logos, all this sort of stuff. And because of my level of convincedness, I was able to do 350 to 400% of the target. But had I believed that white pages was a complete waste of time, to your point, there's no way I would have been successful.
Yes, because people pick up on the subtext. They pick up on every little thing that you say and don't say and the way you say it. And they can feel the vibe of it. And that makes a huge difference. And that's why when we're working for purpose-driven businesses, purpose-led businesses, we're really looking for those evangelists, those people who are going to speak from the heart. Because when they do that, there's no stopping them. And it's no longer sales. It's like they become an ambassador. And that's what you're really looking for in your business. And finding that is important. And we're getting down the track a little bit for where I was planning to start the conversation. But
yes. So apologies.
No. It's really good stuff.
So yeah, key behaviors and environments have got to match. The motivation's got to match. The belief set has got to be complementary.
That's right.
So you've got to figure that out. And you're looking for those who will be able to sort of really own it and speak from the heart and are excited about being involved in that product or
Yes.
service. Okay, what else?
So those are some of the criteria, but there's also a process. Like how do we get that data? Because it's not like you can just X-ray their brain and figure out what's going on inside of it. So what we've built is a very objective, step-by-step process. I would say that it's not infallible. Like recently we had a case where one slipped through the net, and that was because actually we did an interview with the hiring manager who'd never hired before. So you have to be super careful. But most of the time we get super performers and they ramp up fast. And that's because of the detailed approach step by step to every one of these details that I'm going to talk to you about. So the first thing is you've got your idea of who the person is. You get it as clear as you can in your head, how they sound, what they're going to feel like to work with, their culture fit, all their abilities, all of that stuff. The next part of that puzzle, because there's two parts of the equation, is what are we offering to this amazing person? What is our employee value proposition? What's our EVP? And, right now we're post-COVID, the market is crowded. It's cooled down a little bit, but it's been such a hot market. And I was reading the ABS put out in 2022 that almost 70% of businesses were unable to find the candidates that they were looking for. And that's only slightly cooled down in the last couple of months. So there's been a massive talent shortage. And those larger companies or those companies with well-developed EVPs, they can attract. And it's not going to work to put out an offer that is lukewarm or uninspiring. And so how do we build our EVP? Have to look within your own company and really figure out what are the layers of value that we're offering to the salesperson. If we did the work on remuneration, that's a big one. We should also consider career path, development path. Salespeople do love to grow. They love a challenge. They're those crazy people that will climb a mountain just for the sake of reaching the top. I shouldn't generalize, but many of them would sit in that category. You know what I mean? They love sports. They're competitive and competitive with themselves. So a growth opportunity is a big thing for them, both professionally, personally, career-wise, emotionally. What are the other things that they love? Flexibility is huge now. The capacity for hybrid work. Culture is super, super important for people. Am I going to be treated well? Am I going to like these people? Are they ethical and honourable and all those sorts of things? And there's often lots of little perks. We only have to look at Google and Facebook and all of them and how they've ramped up their EVP to see how successful that strategy can be.
Talila, that is the perfect place for a plug for Scale Up's Roadmap, my course on 8-figure strategy, because in module 6, after you've actually figured out what your strategy is going to be, the next question is what resources I'm going to need. So you're going to reverse engineer your org chart for the next 3 years, and then you're going to figure out exactly what you just said. That's great. You know who you need. How on earth are you going to attract them? You actually have to do, there's a whole module on EVP.
Perfect.
What are the components? How do you think about it? And small companies often think that's something that big companies do, and they're absolutely wrong. It's actually all the uniqueness, to your point around culture. It's not good enough to say, we've got a great culture. Whoopie-doo. They need to know, well, what does that actually feel like? Is it just drinks on a Friday afternoon? How do you collaborate? When does the team get together? How do decisions get made? Like how clear is the alignment between my job and the company's success? All these things are all part of culture. Like don't feel bad if you're a smaller business. It doesn't mean that you don't have something super valuable. You got to think cleverly about what you have to offer and how to explain it or show it to people so they can feel like that's something they want to be part of.
Very, very true. And actually, one of the things that small businesses have, it's a very dynamic environment. It's a harder environment, but what it does offer is growth opportunities. It does offer excitement, a chance to actually forge and be a part of the strategy, which in large companies, once just a name, And another thing is when they're socially conscious or purpose-driven businesses, salespeople that are evangelists love that stuff because that means they're going out and they're doing something meaningful every single day. It's what you said about having that passion about what they're doing, that it really matters to them to achieve this result. Yeah. And as an example, we had the honor of working with a major national hearing company, and we hired a dozen people for them nationally. And we were looking all the time for that passion and that motivation, and that trumped a lot of other things. I mean, they have a good EVP, but that trumped the salary to some extent. And those people ramped up so fast and did so well because they had that passion. That's
so you got clarity on who the person is, you got a really solid offer, and you got something compelling to attract them to. What's next?
So then you put it all together and you write the most compelling job ad campaign in the history of the world, or at least in your world. It needs to be like a beacon in the marketplace, because it's actually a myth that Seek doesn't matter anymore. Seek is a very powerful job board, and a vast number of candidates still come through Seek, including from recruiters. So, you can't overlook it. But whether you're going Seek, LinkedIn, or really you need as many outlets as you can, recruiter databases, looking in the back ends, using talent search and all that stuff, you need the offer to sound, you need all of that in there. Who do you have to be and who are we? And they have to read that and go, wow. And if you write it right, and I was taught this by a psychologist in the early days when we used to use a psychometric test, a different psychometric test, you write it almost like you're throwing down the gauntlet. Are you this person? It's almost a challenge. Can you do this? And if so, only if so, please apply, because this is what we can do for you. And I remember doing this in the early days. We hired a sales manager for a home building company. And they were, when I first told there was a GM, this is how we write the job ad. She said to me later when she did a feedback thing, I thought you were just like BSing me, because I said to her, the right person will read it and get fired up. The wrong person will read it and actually self-disqualify themselves out. And she said, oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
She said, I read that ad and I totally disqualified myself. So it worked, right? It made her say, I am not that person. And it's got to do that.
Yeah.
And actually the sales manager we got, someone else read that ad and said, hey, read this. This is you. Read this. And he went and read it, and he wasn't actually actively looking. And he applied and got the job and went on to become the GM of that company. So, really throw down the.
I love that there's some focus on the job ad and the compellingness of that, because to your point, everything's. If you're looking for A players, let's just not forget they have options.
They do have a lot of options. Yes.
And they're not thinking about your business today if you're a smaller company. And if they're thinking about kind of career opportunity, they're probably thinking about something bigger. And so you've got to get cut through. And you can, but you've got to put some effort into it. So let's assume now that you've got this compelling campaign, you've got great job ad, you're getting the engagement, you're now starting to get applications.
What's next? And I'll just, what's next is the applications are going to be flooding in, handling them correctly. And we have to remember that a day in recruitment is a long time, particularly in a hot market. And if they're applied for your job, they've applied for others, and they might be down the track with others. So someone's got to be manning that station and really checking everything really fast and getting back to people. It's also good manners to get back to everyone. It is difficult to do, and that's why we use leverage systems, so we really focus in the early weeks of the campaign. But it's essential for your brand and for your image as well. And the speed with which you respond says a lot about you, and it gets them excited and it keeps the excitement level up. So responding rapidly is important. And then how do we respond? How do we start to screen them? Because that assessment that I told you about that we used to use, they've done millions of sales. They've assessed millions of salespeople for the last 10 years. And they are very big on the fact that only 26% of salespeople really have the goods, which is a pretty low number. It's 1 in 4. And everyone else is either average or terrible. It's pretty harsh. And really, if you've got a good sales system, a lot of that doesn't matter. But if you want those top performers, being able to find them and address them quickly is going to be really key. So one of the things that we do in our system is that we have an internal scoring rubric for the resume and the cover letter. And we're looking for how well does the resume fit certain key points, and have they addressed what we asked for? Have they personalized the cover letter and addressed what we asked for in there? And depending on whether they score, they're either in or out. And if they're really high, they get VIP treatment and an immediate conversation. If they're sort of doing well but not really high, they will get the next step. And if they're not, we'll send them a very polite, thank you so much, not quite what we're looking for, so that everyone kind of knows where to stand fairly early on. So then moving to the next stage, you've got the opportunity to gather a little bit more data. And we've learned by experience that there would be surprising red flags that you would not think of. So for example, you know how on Seek you can put a few questions. Do you have a valid driver's license? Do you have a vehicle? Yes and yes is what we got from one particular candidate. And then this was probably very early on, probably the first or second year of when we were hiring salespeople. This person went right to the end and got hired by a very excited hiring manager. And then it was found out that they had been driving under the influence. So even though they did have a driver's license and a vehicle, they couldn't actually drive the damn thing. So that was a real wake-up call to us that you cannot assume anything. So, for example, if the person's going to work from home, we need to dig in. And we can do this either by a bit of a form that we get them to fill in before our first questions, or in the initial detailed screening interview, which we always do by video, not phone. Tell me about your home working environment. What's the setup? Making sure that they've got a space that's not intruded on. What disturbs you during the day? What's your internet like? Tell me about your computer system. Tell me about, is it ergonomic chair? I don't care. Just don't leave up things unturned, because we have to be sure. We don't want to hire them and then find out that, there's problems there.
Yeah. So
the first thing we often do is send them a set of questions saying, fantastic, you've got to the next stage. We want to have an interview with you. Before you book that, could you just answer a few questions? Then we get some yes and no answers in writing, and that's really useful. We can weed out some of those things. And again, if there's a red flag or a yellow flag, we can take action. Red flag, sorry, not a fit. Yellow flag, raise it in the interview, in the screening call.
Yeah, okay.
So then
And then how long is your screening call usually going for?
Depending on the depth of the role and how many candidates they are and how high level, it could be between 10 and 20, 25 minutes, that initial call. And what we want to do there is, again, basic housekeeping. Do you live in the right area so that you could locate to the right place? Making sure that what they've said on their resume is accurate, for example, as an example. Things like, for example, we've had salespeople who were actually building another business on the side, and they just saw this as a money-making engine until the time when a year or two later they could throw the towel and move to their business. So we try to find that stuff out, because if the business owner is hiring for the long term and wants someone for the next 5 years, it's just not very fair that this isn't known. Yep. Another example would be, and again, I have to be very careful here because we have to respect people's rights to live the way that they need to live and give everyone equal opportunity. Yep. But the things that happen outside of work do affect our ability to work. And if we have massive commitments on the weekends and at nights and all these other things, then it's important to know about them, because salespeople role particularly is not always a 9-to-5 job. It kind of can take over life a little bit. Sometimes you have to do things on a weekend or at night, and therefore those things become important to know. Another example we've had is someone who was studying for a degree really hard and planned to only be in that job for a few months until they got the degree, things like that. You need to know. And so we do our best to uncover all of those things. Another one that you mentioned last time, I think, is income expectations. Where are they? Do they need to sit to make sure that they're aligned and people are going to be happy moving forward? So
do you put how do you connect, what do you recommend to clients around income expectation setting in the job ad up front versus in this interview versus later on? Can you give me an example
that's a
of
good question.
How you would approach
it?
So
because so many salespeople roles are a mixture of base plus commission or bonus, the base can often be well under 6 figures, and the commission can get them into the reasonable 6 figures. So it's important to express that correctly. What we tend to do is we make sure that the base is competitive and solid. And we say something like that, competitive base or solid base plus commissions. That base is often negotiable depending on the quality of the person by about 5 to 10K. But the commission structure, we then provide an OTE. And that OTE, or the on-target earning, is based on the reverse engineered pipeline that was done in the workings before. And sometimes there's a year one OTE is different from year 2 and 3 because the person's building up. We even express that. So when we're asking that initial question, we're checking that the base particularly is all right for them.
Yeah.
So that's an important point.
And so would you usually state the base, or would you usually say something like OTE of X dollars, including solid base and commission? And then when you get to the call, you're trying to understand their base, so that if you're thinking the base is going to be 70 and they're thinking the base is going to be 150, at that stage, you could have some issues.
Yes, I mean, that's a very extreme example, but it could be out by 10 to 15 or even 20. And so it's good to do that and reality check it there. That's correct.
Okay. And then anything else in the video screen before you sort of move to your next interview or knock people out?
There's one thing we do, which I think is quite fun, and I would recommend everyone to do, which is get them to pitch themselves in a minute or less. What do you learn from this? Their ability to sell, their ability to communicate, whether they talk too much and they can follow the instruction and actually stay under a minute. That's a real eye-opener. Sometimes I could tell you their ability to address what was said was important to the company, whether it's about them or whether they're pitching for the company. All those things come out. And that minute is amazing.
Can you just explain the last component about kind of the relationship between them and the company, and like what's the actual phrase that you use to set up that little 1 minute?
So we would say something like, okay, great. You've told us all this about yourself. It's really good to know. Now tell me, we've seen quite a few candidates. If you had to give us in a nutshell 1 minute, why are you the perfect fit for this role? What makes you stand out? Why should they hire you? That's it. And just say a minute, please, and see what happens. So that really works. It works amazingly well. And it's often the make or break of the video interview.
And so then just give me an example of the break. Like, what is it that you're looking for where if you saw it, you'd go, ugh, okay, I'm not loving that. Or if you saw it, you'd go, that's a good sign. Let's proceed to next step.
Okay. So, I'm not loving that is they take 3 minutes. They're boring. They don't have charisma. It's all about what it can do for them, or it's not what they're going to do for the company. Well, they don't address specifically why the company and they are a good fit. They speak in generalized terms that are too general to have meaning. And on the contrary, if they're a great fit, they will talk specifically to the role. They'll have incredible confidence about it. They'll have presence, and every word will count, and they will really present well.
Cool.
Yes. So that's a really good one. A little bit of that secret sauce that you asked for.
Yes, absolutely. I've got some more to add into when you get to your next interviewing stage. So let's assume you've done that. Sounds like, okay, the REM's in expectations. You haven't seen any red flags around kind of life, the home context, anything else that you think could be a red flag. The presentation was awesome. It was very focused on the company and the fit, and it was clear. And you go, this is a good candidate. So what's next?
The next thing from our point of view is to set them up with an interview with the client, or if you are the person hiring, to interview them. We tend to find that one interview is not enough and one person is not enough. Particularly if it's a key role, there should be a first interview and a second interview, maybe a task in between, and then an assessment. And the first interview can really dig into a lot of stuff. But it's a sale on both sides. So the salesperson is selling themselves and the company owner is also selling themselves, and they have to ask and tell each other a lot of stuff. And we recommend having quite a strategic approach to those questions. If you don't, then as you know, you'll go by gut feel, and salespeople feel great. So it's one of our sales managers says something like, I've fallen for the sizzle too many times without tasting the sausage. And it's true. They sizzle really well, right? And
they do. interview one, as you said, they're usually expert at thinking through how do I get through interview one, and so they've usually prepared well, they're articulate, they get
Yes.
through it. What are some of your favorite, like what's one or two or three of your favorite questions in interview one that you think adds a lot of value to the hirer?
Yeah. So first thing is, don't ask them what they can do. Ask them what they have done, and always go for examples. Like, give me an example of when you turned this deal around, it had been lost and you won it back, and how did you do it? And get them to speak to it. Or say something like, if they're in a role right now, how are you structuring your follow-ups? And then when they explain it, can you show me your calendar? Show me how it's done. And if their calendar is empty or it's not like that, you can see that they're probably sizzling. So basically, situational or questions that are actually about what's going on or has happened are much more powerful, and they can also be used for reference checking purposes. So those are really good. Another thing that we would encourage is understanding their sales methodology. Some people are very strong at relationship building, which means they need to get to know people, and it takes a long time, but it's great for, again, it comes back to different type of athletes. So it's great for farming, right? Great for keeping people, but that's not necessarily what you want, particularly if you've got a two-call close, right? You don't need a relationship builder. You need a rapport builder, but not a relationship builder. And so understanding the selling methodology, what has been the history, how have they taught themselves to sell, what are they doing to improve themselves? What is their thought process around what sales even is? That's a really important one. And we also like to know, things about them, like, are they morning people, night people? Really deeply understand, who is this person standing in front of me? What is their routine, and what do they do? Do they have written goals, for example? That's always a very good sign. Things like that. So lots of things. And sorry, what was that? Having your questions structured will prevent them from taking you off course. And some of the things to look for is evasive answers. Like, what's your biggest weakness? I'm such a perfectionist. I try really hard and I spend too long on things. That is not a weakness, right? So, it may be, but it's also a cover-up possibly. So you have to dig deeper. Or tell me a story of when you did X, Y, Z. And then the answer is, I used to do that a lot. There were lots of times when I did that kind of thing. Well, that's not a story, is it? So great. Tell me one of those stories. Be specific. When did it happen? Who did it happen to? Who were you talking to? Be precise.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have to ask them 4 or 5 times.
Yeah. And then they're like, I was involved in a company where the company used to do all sorts of things like that. And you're like, that's
exactly.
Not you.
And that's another thing that we found the hard way, which is a salesperson may have been involved in a deal that was huge, but doesn't mean they drove that deal.
They drove it, yeah. What role? Yeah, absolutely. What role do you actually play?
Yes. So
do you in your first or second interview, do you ever role play their kind of needs analysis to see how they respond to sort of question asking, how deep it goes, how they're curious, are they trigger happy?
Yes. We have an assessment that we use, which is basically when you're shortlisted, we recommend everyone uses this assessment. Not all of our clients want to, but those who've built playbooks with us always do. And it's always so powerful. Usually those who don't use it, they don't have anything to assess with. Like, the needs analysis isn't a documented process. There's nothing built. So it's harder for them to figure out how to do this. But for those who have it, it's really easy. We go, here's the playbook section. Here's a recording. Go away and ring me back and let's do this. And there's nothing better because you learn so much about them. You can just do it off your own back. And that's what you can do when you don't have that documented. And that has been very successful too.
I've supported a lot of clients in those interviews to run just mini role plays. I've never hired a sales role, no matter actually how senior, without a basic role play. And I haven't done it through a formal assessment model. I've just run it like a like an activity like, I work for a pen company, you're inquiring
Yeah.
about pens, like go, basically. You're the salesperson, I'm the company. No, sorry. I'm the client. My brain's just exploded. Yeah, they're fundamental. Yeah, they work for the pen company. I'm a potential client. Yeah, I'm calling them, and they're essentially got to figure out the needs. And I have a huge order. Like I've got all sorts of things that I'm willing to buy, and I know what all those things are before I go into this. And all I'm really looking for is, do they get through the layers? Like, do they keep digging until they understand the motivations, the reasons, the drivers, the pains, the problems? And if they don't, it's amazing. They'll literally get to like, oh yeah, we've got a pen and it's blue and it costs this much and would you like it? And I'm thinking, I was going to buy like 70,000 pens that were personalized and branded and diamond plated and sent by courier and all these other things. And I'll only give that information bit by bit based on how they question. And it's so interesting to see. And in every case, I don't think I've ever been proven otherwise that the trigger happy ones end up being terrible salespeople, because the moment they see a buying signal, they just try to close deals. The ones who are happy to be a detective and be curious and are okay in that state and literally think of themselves like, there's no way I could know what the solution is until I fully understand what is going on with you and why you're thinking that and what problems it's actually solving. And those ones always get somewhere between 50 and 100% of the deal value out of them. I'm always willing to give it, but it's such an interesting exercise.
I love it.
Because I can't prepare for it. They just have to be on the spot, and you just get a sense of that. And if I really thought they had the capability and they failed that exercise, then to your point, in interview 2, I'll run it again. And I'll even say to them, hey, I'm actually looking for you to dig and do a needs analysis and be comfortable with asking uncomfortable questions and, like be a detective. And then some of them still give up halfway because they're just uncomfortable. And that just tells me everything about their capacity to find full value in any deal or get to real motivations and real pains, because those who can be comfortable with it and all the silence and all that stuff, they get much bigger deals done.
It's a real indicator of emotional intelligence, isn't it? Just their capacity to understand the other person's psychology and work with it, which is really what sales is, sales communication is. And interestingly, and this is why I love sales systems, a needs analysis is something you need to train a little bit to do. But if you've got the system documented, anyone can do it. And that's where the emotional intelligence will shine. You find that the admin lady in the corner is actually a great salesperson if you give her the structure to do it. And I've seen that so many times. We had a very recent example of that where we had someone sell a quite significant sale based off a structure which came from someone else. And they'd never been able to make this kind of sale before, but once they had the structure, they were just ready to rock and roll. But to your point, that will you sell me this pen thing is awesome. I love it.
It's good value. So let's assume you have done. I'm just conscious of how much time we've got left. I want to make sure that you get through all the stuff that you wanted to. So we've kind of done a pretty solid sounding first interview. When are you doing the assessment? Are you doing that pre-first interview, or is that in between interview 1 and interview 2? Where is that?
It probably depends on the number of candidates that you have. If you if you've got 5 really good ones and you need to start weeding them out, I would put the assessment in first. Otherwise, you could put it a bit later if there's like 2 and struggling to figure out which of them.
Yeah.
So there's that element that you said, which is sell me this pen or show me your discovery skills, sales conversation. But there are other elements as well. So in our assessment, we'll ask them, here's a few different clients. Read about our business. Here's a bit about our business. Here's a few clients. I want you to analyze which one is a good fit to follow, which one isn't a good fit, which one is okay, and then choose one of them and then hold the discovery on that. So that's part of the assessment. And then the next piece is, okay, you held the discovery, document everything that was sent by the client. What would you put in the CRM and what would you email them? Because that will show them a set of skills.
Wow.
And if you cover all of those, you pretty much cover the thinking, the selling, and the documentation, and you've ruled out a lot of problems. So,
is this, Talila, an off-the-shelf tool that you guys use that founders can get themselves, or is it something that's proprietary to Emple?
We created it ourselves out of need. Okay. But I think, look, I haven't actually ever shared it with anyone. But I have told people that listen to this podcast that they can come along and do the Sales Hire Ready consult with us. what I am thinking of doing at that point is giving them one tool that suits them. So whether it's an onboarding plan template, maybe this assessment tool template, or maybe, budgeting or a KPI thing, something that meets their direst need or their biggest gap.
Now, what if I told you that with just 15 minutes of effort, you could find out the top 3 things that are going to hold your business back from scaling in a sustainable way so that you can fulfill its potential and you can enjoy it as much as you deserve to? And what if I told you in that same 15 minutes of effort, you can find out how your business stacks up against thousands of other businesses who've taken the same test so you can actually see how you compare? If that sounds interesting, you need to head straight over to scalehq.com.au/growth score. You're going to complete a short survey and you're going to get back in your inbox a free 9-page report that's going to show you how you stack up versus your peers and where you need to focus to unlock scalability and a greater level of enjoyment in your business. And for a limited time, I'm going to offer you a free 30-minute debrief on the report where myself or one of our ScaleHQ founder mentors, who are all experienced CEOs and have scaled successfully, will unpack your specific report with you. We've done hundreds of these, and so we know exactly how to help you get the most out of the insights in there. There's no selling from us, just lots of value for you. Head over to scalehq.com.au/growth score and get your free growth score report right now. You are going to love it. So can you just unpack for those people maybe who didn't hear the last episode? So what is this sort of Sales Hire Ready assessment, and then where do they go to get access to it?
So the Sales Hire Ready assessment is a 15 to 20-minute conversation with us. It's basically, where are you at? Are you ready to hire a salesperson? You need to step back, protect your money, and do a few things first. And we ask a series of questions, and then we give you a little benchmark score: terrible, great, ready to go and hire, you're good, or do these things.
You're crazy.
Do these things first, or no, just please don't. You will so regret it if you do. And they get a little report, and each one has a tip, like do this first, do this next, and then we can give them a debrief and a tool to assist them in their lowest scoring area.
Awesome. So at least going to give them a bit of clarity as to where they're at, and it's going to allow them to move forward, whether they work with emple or not. They're
That's
going to get
right.
some value from that process. So thank you very much for offering that to our
Great
audience.
pleasure.
And the URL they go to get that
it's
is what?
pages.emple.com.au/sales hire ready. And hopefully you can put it at the bottom of this podcast as well, in case
that will be. Yeah, and so you can either look at the last episode, you'll just look at the show notes, you'll see the link in there, or they'll also be in the show notes for this episode.
Fantastic.
So please make sure you go check that out. Okay, so let's assume, interview 1, we're going, okay, lots of ticks. Maybe we've done the sales assessment yet, maybe we haven't done it, but we're now heading into interview 2. Talk to me about what tasks do you like to set up, because I'm a huge fan of the work in between interview 1 and interview 2 and how that feeds into interview 2. Tell me about what you do.
So if they have a sales playbook, this is a great opportunity to give them a piece of that playbook, because you want to learn. We want to see that they're learning. We want to see that they're willing to use our structure. We want to make sure that they are motivated to act. And, if we do this now, we'll knock off some training time when we hire them. So win-win for everyone, because they'll also jump in a bit more educated. So we can share an element of our playbook and get them to absorb that. That is really, really powerful. And then we can ask them about it in the final interview and really figure out, did they understand what they read? Did they take the time to absorb it? Do they now know what our clients' greatest pain points are, for example, or how we're different from competitors, or what are the biggest problems that we solve, or which personas to talk to, things like that. So that's the main one that we use.
Beautiful.
We have also had things where we've sent them to the website, asked them to absorb content, things like that, asked them to do a small task of some sort, like creating an email or things like that. But our assessment covers all of that now, so we don't tend to do creation of stuff separate to that.
Yes, understood. That makes complete sense. And some other things, people might want to think about. You can, of course, get them to present on something broad, but that might be, for example, to your point, okay, you've now learned a bit more, like present the, give me all of the questions that you're going to ask in a discovery and what sequence are you going to do that and why, or show me what your LinkedIn direct message sequence is going to look like show me number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, like how many they're going to be, so you can get a really quick sense of, do they actually have skills in this, or do they just spray and pray, like is it terrible, how much training am I going to have to do with them? And I guess this would be subject to where you're at with your foundations to train them in afterwards. But there's a lot of things I would never have anyone come to interview 2 without them presenting on something that I'd given them as a task. And I typically would only give them 48 to 72 hours absolute max between interview 1 and 2 to make sure that there's a bit of pressure on them to find time to do it. And that will tell you a lot. If they come prepared, it tells you a lot more about their willingness that do they actually want this job. And if they come unprepared, that tells you a lot about whether they really want this job.
It really does.
Or whether they even remember your name.
Again, we're looking for evangelists. So the evangelists will jump to it and they'll do whatever it takes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So then interview 2?
Interview 2, usually we suggest in person so that you don't get any nasty surprises when you show up and they have a bunch of body piercings and not that there's anything wrong with that, but you know who the person is that you're actually hiring. It's a good idea to eat with them at some point because you learn a lot about their manners from that and things about them come out when they're not so formal. They'll just be more themselves and you'll see more of them. Interview 2, though, itself, we suggest 2 or 3 people should be there from the company, all of them scoring on the core elements of what you want the salesperson to do, which should be in a rubric, and all of them coming with their own questions, and those questions should build on what was said in interview 1 so that it's deep and thorough. And it's
so if those 2 to 3 people weren't all interview 1, you would provide them with, kind of an assessment against the rubric from interview 1 and any notes so they come prepared to be able to build on it? Or would you always try to have the same people in 1 and 2?
At least one of the same person. So usually it's the hiring manager or the founder or whoever's the key person will be in both 1 and 2.
Yeah.
And so they have the knowledge to tell the others, well, last time they said this, but I wasn't sure about that. I wasn't like that. There was a bit of a maze. So have a little bit of a chat first and then go in with a plan to uncover those things. And the other thing too is it's not just about uncovering to them. It's also a time for setting expectations. So it's time to pull out the PMA and pull out the onboarding plan. Say, these are our expectations of you and how do you feel about them and how are you going to make sure that they come knowing what's expected of them and walk them through the contractual side of it. Not a contract, but more the agreement between you and us of what's going to happen and why. And this is useful because a lot of times someone will come into the role and say, I didn't realize I had to do X, Y, Z. They say, well, we told you, we showed you, there were 3 of us there, So it's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Because and they may not give you, if some of that information is kind of new to them, they may not tell you in the room that they've got an issue with it. But what they will do is they will bow out of the process if they've got a problem with it, which is great because now all of a sudden you haven't hired somebody who then get all prepared and then you start onboarding them. And then week 4, when that thing happens that they absolutely hated, they're like, oh, this does not work for me.
That's so true.
I'm a big fan of sharing the onboarding plan. That makes a lot of sense.
And really setting expectations clearly. I mean, there are lots of ways to entice. A lot of times there might be a discrepancy between what the salesperson wants for a base and what the business owner is prepared to pay. And one of a good way of doing that is, prove yourself for the first 6 months, hit these targets or ramp up to this by month 3 or this by month 6, we'll raise your base. And that provides the salesperson with impetus and knowing they'll get what they want, but the business owner with some protection in the meantime.
Yeah, I like that.
Yes.
That. So conscious of how much time we've got left, what are we missing that we need to make sure that we can?
We have to also, all the way through, we have to not only keep them engaged, but be assured that they're not halfway down the process with other roles. So right from the very first time we've talked to them, we need to know what else they're looking at and why and how we stack up in comparison and find what they really want and why about our role if we're passionate about it. Because otherwise you could put a lot of work in and be really excited about someone, make them a job offer and they've gone. And particularly the hot market like today just can't have that happening. So it's really important to know where they're at all the time. Particularly like a few years ago, it was much more of a hirer's market. In other words, you get a lot of candidates, you'd be able to sift them down, you'd be able to do this. Right now it's the opposite. Candidates have got choice, man. And if you make it hard for them, they might leave. So it has to be a gradual build-up of getting invested and asking for stuff. And doing that correctly, you get a really good buy-in along the way. Job offer itself needs to be negotiated carefully, of course. So that requires the skill to be able to express everything properly, show them the remuneration, talk through any sticky areas, make sure there's no misunderstandings. And it's important to get their yes in writing before you tell candidate number 2 or 3 that that they're no longer in the running, just in case anything happens in the meantime.
I interviewed a guy recently from Forsyth Barnes, like in a really fast-growing European recruitment firm, and one of the things they did in the offer process, which I thought was really interesting, because they're really trying to build like a 6-star sort of recruitment process where there's differentiation in all the bits that are sort of normal and boring. And they said actually in the job offer component, they've really changed that, where they actually present to they actually build a PowerPoint where they present back to the person how, given all the information they've had, how they think the values match, why they think they're going to be a good fit. You know, like they really sort of sizzle and dazzle the offer so that actually the offer stands out in the candidate's mind. Because to your point, they may have actually had an offer this morning, your offer in the afternoon, and they've got another one coming tomorrow because it's a candidate's market.
That's very true. That's
so
very true.
Interesting opportunity to sort of jazz it up a little bit, but of course to make sure that you still manage the expectations.
And that's also why when we're doing it, like small to medium businesses, there's often a lot, if they're like ducks, you know, a lot of paddling beneath the surface. You can't see much from the top. They could be about to explode to the next big thing. But if someone sees their job ad and goes to it and they've got a poxy little website that no one spent much time on yet, or it doesn't look as big as, you know, they're considering working for a major company or this, the salesperson can immediately prejudge. So we do use the power of anonymity in ours. And then when we're doing our initial screening call, we're doing as much selling as buying. So whenever they say something that matches, your values are a match for this. This is what they're looking for. It's great that you've got this amount of time. That is also what they're looking for. So we call out all the synchronicities all the time. And if they're not there, we also call that out because it's bye-bye, you know, not a fit.
Yeah, as you said, that's why it's a screening call. Could be screened in.
Screened in or out. That's it. So everything matters, even up to the point of, you know, the first week, the first month. First 6 months are very risky, and that's where you need the onboarding plan, you need the regular check-ins, you need a good managed sales leadership structure. And one of our team is an absolute expert at sales leadership, and she's done a lot of work in this space. Having that good management rhythm and that good feedback system and that good support for the salesperson means that they don't get lost in those initial weeks and they just go upwards. It's very important as well.
Love it. Wow. Talila, I have learned heaps. I have so many takeaways from today. And people, if you're listening, you are rarely going to find someone who's offered as much detail and value as Talila has for you today. So please go back and listen to this and take notes. There's a transcript, by the way, on the website. If you go to scalehq.com.au, click on the pod link and go to Talila's episode and you will see a full transcript. So it may save you some note-taking effort. Feel free to copy and paste from there. But I think the fact that you have, one of the things that really stands out to me is you've used core parts of the foundation building stuff that we talked about in the last episode in the recruitment process, which is why you do those things. You talked about sharing with them the performance management agreement, sharing them with the onboarding plan, using elements of your playbook in the assessment, their training, they're kind of at the assessment in between the interviews. So you can see how all of these things link together. And so I really like the way that you put that together, because I can see how much leverage there is in your sales recruitment process from the foundation building that you've already done.
I will add that all the stuff I've told you today about recruitment will help enormously. But if you really want to get rid of your risk, you do the pre-stuff. Because as I said, you could do the pre-stuff, get an average person and a great result, or you can not do the pre-stuff and get a great person, still be struggling for a few months. So it's all about the pre-stuff.
100%. Talila, I'd really like to acknowledge your generosity of time, information.
Thank you.
There's just so much gold in there, and I look forward to chatting to you again soon. If people want to get in touch with you or follow along, where would you send them to? Probably a good opportunity to reiterate what that URL is. Again, people can go to the show notes, but how would you suggest they get in touch with you if they wanted some support in this process?
They can email me, talila@emple.com.au. They can go to pages.emple.com.au/sales hire ready. You can find me on LinkedIn or our website, emple.com.au. So I'm very happy to help people. I know that the right people will continue to work with for a long time, and those who we aren't a perfect fit for, we can still help them a lot along the way. And that's important.
Fantastic. Talila Kroy from Emple, thank you so much for your time today. And folks, I really hope you got lots of value out of that. If you have a B2B business and you are at the stage of looking to recruit salespeople or already recruiting salespeople and have listened to the last 2 episodes and gone, oh, there's some things that I have not done that would really probably help me, just listen to them both again and go and do it. Obviously, if you need help, you can reach out to Talila, but there's so much practical advice that you could just take and implement, which is the purpose of these 2 episodes. So please enjoy it, implement, improve the results in your sales function and your sales recruitment process. And Talila, I look forward to chatting with you again at some point.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, Sean. I greatly appreciate it.
Pleasure. Okay, we'll speak soon.
Bye.
See ya. The team here at ScaleHQ hope you've enjoyed today's episode. Now, if you want to achieve scale, but you want to know what's going to hold you back, we can help. Head over to scalehq.com.au/growth score to get your free 9-page growth score report. That's going to help you understand where your top 3 barriers are to scale. And if you'd like, we'll even do a free debrief on the report for you with no obligations or expectations, just lots of value from some CEOs who've scaled to help you on your journey. That's scalehq.com.au/growth score. And find out what's holding you back from fulfilling the potential of your business today.